Hi again and welcome everybody to our weekly Sermonette. Hope everybody's doing well and healthy and doing fine, and you and your families are all doing well. There's a prison in New York State. It's known as Sing Sing Prison. It is a maximum security prison, and the story that I'm telling about is about a prisoner in that prison. And the story is told actually by Rabbi Grossman, he still is, a very prominent and famous rabbi in Israel, in Migdal HaEmek, Israel. And he tells the story that one day, while he was visiting New York, he gets a phone call from my father, Rabbi Klein, who was at the time the Rebbe's secretary, the Rebbe's personal secretary. And my father tells him that the Rebbe just requested that Rabbi Grossman be contacted and asked to visit a prisoner who was in Sing Sing prison. And the prisoner's name is so-and-so. And that the Rebbe requested that he visit him. Now, just give a little background to the story. My father told him that he's calling, this was in the 1980s. My father said he's calling him from his car at the Ohel. The Rebbe was at the time visiting the gravesite of his father-in-law of blessed memory. You see, the Rebbe used to take the thousands of letters that he used to receive of people asking him for a blessing. Every once in a while, the Rebbe would take all those letters and take him to the gravesite, the Ohel of his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, and that's where he would pray for them, cry for them. And many of the letters were torn up and left there at the gravesite. And when the Rebbe went there alone. It was a very personal. The Rebbe stood there for hours. There was a little booth, if you want to say, that was built that the Rebbe could stand to protect him from the elements there outside in the cemetery. And the Rebbe would be there alone for hours with these letters and praying for the people. And whoever took the Rebbe to the Ohel, the gravesite, would wait actually outside the Ohel, wait outside for the Rebbe to take the Rebbe back. Now, he says that the Rebbe actually came out in middle of his praying there for all the different people, and asked my father to please call Rabbi Grossman with this request. It was late in the day, fairly late in the day, when he got that call. So he asked my father, he said, Rabbi Klein, is this something that I could wait and take care of tomorrow? Do I have to take care of it immediately? And he says that my father told him that if the Rebbe left the Ohel to put this request, then it must be pressing. Now, also at that time, there wasn't common to have a phone in your car. The phone was actually something unique that the Rebbe had in his car. It worked through an operator. But anyways, he says that if the Rebbe left the Ohel to ask, then it should something that's urgent, and you should probably take care of it right away. Rabbi Grossman canceled his appointments for the rest of the day and had his driver drive him to us in New York to where this prison was. Now, he had no idea how he's going to get in to this prison. He had no credentials. As a matter of fact, he wasn't even a U.S. citizen at the time. But if they got marching orders from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he's going. When he gets there, he drives up to the gates, and they ask him, what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm here to visit so-and-so prisoner, and they let him in right away. And he says it was surprising. It was almost as they were waiting for him. But then he goes on to find out why the grand welcome. This inmate was an Israeli doctor who had been visiting United States and was had been accused of a very, very grave crime and was sentenced to life in prison. And in the last week and a half before this, he had tried to commit suicide already twice. So when they heard there's a rabbi here to visit him, they welcomed him with open arms and gave him the red carpet treatment to meet with this prisoner. When he came and he met with this prisoner, he was the prisoner was down, out, done, and the doctor told him. He says he walked in, and the prisoner was just sitting there, depressed. He says, "Who are you? What do you want?" He says, "He wanted to break the ice." He says, "I have regards for you from the Lubavitcher Rebbe." And the guy broke down into tears. And lo and behold, he didn't know. The guy says, "Look, I'm done. I have nothing to live for. Used to be a prominent doctor here. I'm nothing. Maximum security prison. Everything. I'm at the mercy of others. I have no reason to live." And Rabbi Grossman tried to encourage him, didn't know what to tell him. He says, never too far gone. You could reconnect your relationship with God. And he says, no, I'm too far gone. And Rabbi Grossman all of a sudden said how something popped into his head, a story, what the last thing that he heard from the Rebbe at a Farbrengen. And the Rebbe told him, the Rebbe spoke at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke on a verse in Psalms, which it says about Adam, Kedem v'achir tzartani, that Adam was the first and last of creation. And obviously the question arises, we know that Adam was the last in creation. The last thing that was created was man. After everything else was created, at the end of the sixth day of creation, man was created. So the Rebbe asked the question, how can we say first and last if man was last? And the Rebbe explained that, a man is put together of a body and a soul. The body of man was created last, but the soul of man was created first. Even before the angels were created, the soul of man was created. And there's a lesson to learn from that. And the lesson to learn from that is that, if we live with our soul, we live in sync with our soul, then you know what? We are even higher than the angels. If you live only for your body, then we're reminded, guess what? Every animal and every creature, every fly, every insect was created before you. So again, this, he said, they told this to the prisoner. The prisoner said, did the Rebbe really say that? You could be the greatest, whatever. Anyways, so he spoke to him. He tried to pick up his spirits. He actually came back afterwards and came to Crown Heights. He gave a report to the Rebbe that he visited with this man. He put on tefillin with them. And he asked, the Rebbe, should I try to bring him closer to Judaism? The Rebbe said the most important thing right now is to lift his morale. So for the rest of his visit in New York, every single day he visited this man. And then in the future, whenever he came to New York, he visited this man. And eventually this man, actually, his conviction was overturned and he went back to Israel. As a matter of fact, he just passed away a year ago. Rabbi Grossman, who tells the story, says, I have no idea how the Rebbe knew about this person. This person said he never wrote to the Rebbe. But somehow the Rebbe, amidst of standing at a very holy moment, a very special and serious moment at the gravesite of his father-in-law, is thinking about a inmate in maximum security prison that needs his morale lifted. I want to share another quick story, which is the story that actually in 1988, on the 22nd of Shvat, the Rebbe's wife, passed away suddenly. She was not particularly ill. She had some stomach issues, went to the doctor, she had some internal bleed, and she passed away. The Rebbe lost his immediate family. His brothers died many, many years later. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin had no children. 60 years of marriage, that was the closest person to the Rebbe, and then very quickly, in one fell swoop, that was lost. Late hours in the morning, they actually brought the body of the Rebbetzin back to the home to prepare for burial. The Rebbe came out to meet the bier. The pain on the Rebbe's face was heartbreaking. And also the next day through the funeral, I remember coming in. I was then in Caracas, Venezuela on Shlichut. I came back. I mean, everybody felt the Rebbe's pain. The Rebbe was heartbroken beyond words we could not understand. And at that time, the Rebbe's doctor, the Rebbe's cardiologist, Dr. Ira Weiss, flew in from Chicago to be with the Rebbe. They were concerned. He stood with the Rebbe all along the funeral and later during the Shiva. And he tells a story how right after services during Shiva, He used to walk with the Rebbe upstairs. The Shiva was in the Rebbe's home. He walked up to the second floor together with the Rebbe. He says, and all of a sudden the Rebbe turns around and asks him, he says, Dr. Weitz, is there any news from Mrs. So-and-so? And the story behind that is there was a couple in Chicago who were childless and they were having trouble conceiving. And Dr. Weiss, when he came, used to talk to the Rebbe about this couple. And he was shocked in the middle of this pain, his personal greatest loss. And yet the Rebbe is concerned about a childless couple in Chicago and wants to know if there's any good news from Mrs. So-and-so. You know, there are different types of leaders in the world. The Rebbe explains in a Sikha this concept that there are leaders of specific groups. There are leaders of certain countries. Their primary interest is of the group that they lead. Whether it's a country, whether it's a rabbi of a community or a synagogue, their main concern is their constituency, if you want to say, their group. They are very, very fine leaders, but they are not a Rebbe. A Rebbe is someone who cares for every single Jew or person on the face of the globe. As a matter of fact, the word Rebbe in Hebrew, Rebbe, is an acronym, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the children of Israel. Just like a head feels the pain of every limb in their body, same thing, a Rebbe feels the pain of every single Jew on the face of the globe. And it's with that spirit and with that responsibility that the whole idea of Chabad, shlichut, of a shliach going all over the world to make sure and to care for every single Jew out there. Whether it's to make sure that there's a Seder in China, whether it's to make sure that a Jew attends a Hanukkah celebration to be able to celebrate Hanukkah in Tennessee, or that a Jew in Alaska has the ability to hear shofar on Rosh Hashanah. That is what the Rebbe, internalized. The Rebbe cared about every single person on the face of the globe. That is what a true Rebbe is really all about. Yesterday we marked the 26th yahrzeit of the Rebbe. The Rebbe is not here physically, and therefore we need to be the hands and the feet of the Rebbe to care for every individual unconditionally, no matter who or she might be. We need to care for them physically, and we even more so have to care for them spiritually, trying to make sure that they have the opportunity to be able to live in sync with their soul and to be able to do another mitzvah. So the question is, when you come to help somebody else, the question is, how do I know what the other person really needs? So I'm reminded of an interesting anecdote that they describe about these two Russian peasants who are sitting at a bar in Russia. And as the time goes on, they're both now well intoxicated in a drunken stupor. One turns to the other and he asks his drunken friend, he says, "Do you love me?" And the other fellow tells him back, and he says, "Sure, I love you." He says, "If you love me, then tell me what's bothering me. Tell me what's hurting me. Tell me what I need." And so, my friends, I think that is the answer and the lesson that we have to know. We have to care for every person unconditionally, or learn from the lessons of the Rebbe, to care for every individual, whoever they might be. We don't have to wait for a phone call from Rabbi Klein to be able to tell us exactly what to do, because that won't happen. The Rebbe is not here with us to give us that instruction. But we need to be there for every person. And if the question is, what are we supposed to do? If we really cared for the person that we know, the person in our circle, our friends, our neighbors, family, or the Jew sitting across from us, if we really cared for them, we would know exactly what we have to do. Let us hope that we could live from the lessons of the Rebbe and be a true living legacy to the Rebbe. And let us hope that quickly and speedily we shall merit the time where we shall be reunited with the Rebbe and all our loved ones, quickly and speedily with the coming of Mashiach. May it be speedily in our days. Amen.